This Big 12 Game of the Week featuring the BYU Cougars and Kansas Jayhawks on the Big 12 Experience, part of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, is brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the app now and use the code SGP. New customers can score $200 in bonus bets instantly when they bet just $5 on football, only on DraftKings Sportsbook with the code SGP. We're also brought to you by Game Time. Snag those tickets without the stress. Use the promo code CFBX on your first purchase to save $20. Download the Game Time app and use the promo code CFBX. And we're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Play the Underdog Pick'em in college or NFL and win up to 20 times in one game. Use the promo code SGPN at Underdog Fantasy for a 100% deposit up to $100. And finally, last but not least, we're brought to you by Hall of Fame Bets, the sports betting research platform for parlays, player props, and game lines. Download the Hall of Fame Bets app or visit hofbets.com and use the promo code SGPN to get 50% off your first month and start making smarter bets today. Welcome, everybody, back to the Big 12 College Experience, part of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Big 12 conference play is finally here. No more previewing all these FCS, FBS games. And yes, shout out to the chat, Eat Shit Pit, of course, always. This is an Eat Shit Pit podcast. How about the Mountaineers? Told you, that was the lock of the freaking year. Pitt Panthers had no chance of coming into Morgantown on that environment, on that night. If you're wondering who you're listening to, I am Moneyline Mac, a.k.a. the former video coordinator for Bob Huggins, who I got to see this weekend, spent some time with, and Frank Martin, and joined each and on every episode. And he got in on a little 33-1 Moneyline parlay with those Miami Redhawks. So we unfortunately faded the Big 12 with Cincinnati. But we got the BYU Cougars getting it done in Fayetteville and, of course, the Mountaineers. I am Moneyline Mac, and he is the Big 12 guru. He's got family everywhere, whether it's in Waco, Stillwater, Norman. He's everywhere. He's got Orlando, Cincinnati. Troy, what's up? Welcome back from Walter Sports Bar.
Yeah, eat shit Pitt, suck it. Suck that dick, Pittsburgh. I love it. I mean, you send me the video of the Sweet Caroline playing, and like as soon as I got the text message and it said like multimedia message, I knew right away what it was. Oh man, there's nothing more beautiful than Huskar just doing the eat shit Pitt all together. All the administrators and officials on the sideline are cracking up, doubled over, laughing. Man, it doesn't get any better than that. Lose a quarterback and still beat the crap out of your rival. Man, send them back up north. Nobody gives a shit about Pitt.
Nobody cares about Pitt, and that's why we're not talking about Pitt until basketball play when the Mountaineers will beat the shit out of them like they always do. But you know what we're here to do? We're here, and yes, shout out to the chat, Terrell. There is a horns down on our Big 12 logos for everybody watching on youtube.com/college experience. This podcast is not biased at all on which teams we like. I'll tell you a team we do like, and that's why we're bringing him on. He is the Big 12 Mafia featuring the BYU Cougars, a.k.a. Mr. Bomber. First, Big 12 Mafia, welcome to the Big 12 College Experience. And welcome to the Big 12. Glad to have you guys. And, you guys are off to a fast start here.
Yeah, we couldn't be better, right? We're really glad to be in the Big 12. We think it's going to be a fantastic fit. I think the Big 12 right now is easily the third best conference in the country. There's been rumors that there's even more additions that might potentially come in the next year. So, yeah, just going from strength to strength. And then, obviously, BYU's getting off to a good start this year, 3-0, and starting to look not too bad.
So, trying to get right into it. Heck of a win on the road in Fayetteville. I mean, The one thing I wanted to ask about was they were able to win that game, but they were only averaging just under 5 yards per play, 4.9 yards per play. Now, do you think that Arkansas's defense is a little bit better than Kansas's, and that number might go up here this week? Because at 4.9 yards per play, I don't know if that's going to get it done against Kansas. And what do you think that the offense has to do a little bit differently maybe to have a little bit more success?
Got to bring in those wide receivers, right? That's where we've struggled the first 3 games of the year. Cody Apps, being the number 1 receiver, has been hurt. He just barely came back on Saturday, so he's not nearly back into the offense. We've got Keanu Hill. There's 4 or 5 good receivers that are on this squad, but they're just a little bit off with Kedon Slovis right now, and I think it's coming. Of all the things you could be critical of Kedon Slovis, he doesn't turn the ball over. Right. And especially in Big 12 play, not turning the ball over is going to mean some of those short yardage gains, 5 yards a play isn't great. But if you're getting 2 or 3 turnovers a game, that can really shorten how many yards you actually need, especially if they're on their side of the field. So you can score a lot of points and do fairly well if your defense doesn't get penalties and you get turnovers. And they look like they're going to start doing that. This is a change. I don't know if you guys know about BYU's defense the last several years. It was basically a 3 drop 8 defense. There was no strategy, no scheme. So what they did is they're coming into the Big 12, so they paid big money for a defensive coordinator to come in. Jay Hill came in from the Weber State. He was their head coach. He's a defensive guru. And you can definitely tell these 3 games really showed out that defense is flexing and it's adding pressure where they don't expect it, and they're doing pretty well.
Big 12 Mafia, I think you got a copy of my notes because you stole the question right from me. Talk about how the impact of Jay Hill. He comes over from Weber State. You don't see a head coach leave to go be a defensive coordinator, but it kind of tells you about the investments that BYU wants to make in football going forward. Talk about just his impact early on. I know the Sam Houston State was a bit of a grinder in game number 1, but I mean, the defense is much improved from last year, in my opinion. What do you guys think?
Oh, it's 100%. I mean, you got to understand and be in the mindset of BYU fans. For the last 3 years, they've been a top 20 offense each and every year. Zach Wilson, Jaron Hall, these guys are in the NFL right now, right? And that's a lot to lose. So when Kedon Slovis comes in, he's stepping into an operation that's already well-oiled and it's working well. Now you add a defense, and last year they were, I think, 119th out of 131 in total defense. That's unsustainable, right? You don't belong in any big conference if you're doing that kind of stats. So they turned it around. They're paying him a lot of money for an assistant coordinator. For a coordinator, he's making like $1.2 million, something like that. That's a lot of money, especially in BYU land. So the investments there. They went out and got a bunch of transfers. I think there were 16th or 17th in total transfers for quality, and they turned the roster over. 60 players are different from the. Everybody talks about Colorado turning over 86. BYU turned over 60. That is not a small amount, and yet they're starting to hit their stride. So if we win this Kansas game, and I'm not saying we're going to, but if we can beat Kansas and then the next week we win our opener with Cincinnati at home, Big 12 opener, right? Historic time. BYU generally plays good in those instances. You're off to a 5-0 start, and TCU might be down. There's some Iowa State's down. Now you're looking at 7 wins, 8 wins, 9 wins, and they start to stack up on each other.
And we were just kind of talking about that. Ryan and I did their separate Ryan and Rush podcast right before this. Some of those teams that were predicted to be, like middle tier Big 12 teams, they're all going to have a shot because the top teams aren't dominant by any fashion. I mean, you could say Oklahoma's dominant, but they're playing, little sisters of the poor and blind.
Right. That's true.
The question that I wanted to ask specifically, because you've probably watched a lot more of just BYU games, especially up until last week. Kedon Slovis looks like a different quarterback so far. His biggest issue at Pitt last year, he threw 10 touchdowns but 9 interceptions. And he's 6-1 so far this year on TD to interceptions. This BYU-Kansas game, the biggest handicap is the fact that it's assumed that Jalon Daniels is significantly going to outperform Kedon Slovis.
Right.
And you said something about the wide receivers and all that. how is Kedon Slovis going to beat or out at least perform up to par with Jalon Daniels in this game? Is it just more passes out wide? Is it trying to take advantage of something on the Kansas defense specifically that BYU can exploit or something like that?
I think the biggest difference is going to be how well BYU adds pressure. So everybody knows how good Daniels is, right? There's no doubt about the fact that he's easily one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the league, and he's probably top 15 in the nation. So containing him is what the banner order is going to be, not necessarily stopping them. They're going to get their pressures down the field, but if BYU can just keep everything in front of them and then just add a little bit of additional pressure with the offense. Kedon Slovis, the biggest difference, you asked the difference between the two things. At USC, he was a 4-star athlete, right? He came out highly recruited, and then he loses his coach in the middle of the season, totally gets blown up. And then when Riley came in, he said, sorry, we're going to turn the keys over to this guy named Williams, right? So it's not like there was an option for him to stick around. The second thing is when he went to Pitt, Jordan Addison was supposed to be his number 1 receiver. Jordan Addison's in the NFL now, went to USC last year, blew up, and so he lost his main threat. The only reason he went to Pitt was because Jordan Addison was there. So, yeah, he's thrown for over 10,000 yards. Is he long in the tooth? Yeah, he is. But that, I would say, it's better for BYU because their entire team in general is more experienced. And that's why as they hit their stride going into this season, they could be much more dangerous.
Yeah. No, and I think the most underrated thing about BYU and what an advantage that nobody talks about is Lavelle Edwards Stadium. And all these teams that have to go out to play at that elevation, we talk about it all the time on this show. When we broke down each team, I don't think we had BYU losing a home game. And we've seen it teams like Oregon that have gone out there last year, or sorry, Baylor. I got my green teams mixed up. They were able to pick them off. In the past, they've had issues scheduling those teams because nobody wanted to go to BYU and play because you probably were going to get beat. Talk about how the travel, B, the elevation, just how much that could be a dominant home field advantage for years to come in the Big 12. Arguably the hardest place to play in the league now.
I tell you what, it's going to be something. That if they have any advantage, it's that 3 points you get immediately because of home field. And it might even be more than that because you add in the complications. Travel isn't such a big deal. We're only at 45 minutes south from Salt Lake. You can now charter into Provo. So travel's not really the thing. What is the thing, though, is elevation and time of day. When BYU plays after, 8 p.m. Eastern, there's some ridiculous 16-2 or something like that in the last 3 years. When they play in those late games, which everybody else shies away from the night games, right? Everybody's like, why would you want to play at night? Nobody wants to watch games at night. That is the flip side for BYU. They love the night games. Early evening and night games is where BYU can really get out and strut at stuff. You brought up Baylor last year. Everybody came away from that game that was a Baylor person saying, wow, how are we going to come in here and win year in and year out? So are they automatically going to win every game at home? No, you can't say that in a league like the Big 12. But I tell you what, I think they're ready to bushwhack Oklahoma at the end of the year. It's not only is it the game before the last of the season, but Oklahoma's going to come in and they're going to be at a long run of 4 games that there's a tough people in front of them. So they can't look ahead and game plan for a BYU. Even if BYU is sitting at 6-4 or something like that at that game, they're still extremely dangerous because of the location and really what the elevation does to people. It's just as bad as when BYU has to go down to elevation. We were in Arkansas on Saturday, and I think what you saw is BYU travels well. Not only do they travel from a fan's perspective, but their conditioning is incredible. They went in there, and by the end of the game, you can make an argument BYU is in better physical condition than Arkansas was.
And you mentioned the home schedule is pretty favorable for you guys. I think it's they got Oklahoma, Iowa State, and Tech and Cincinnati.
That's right.
Their home games.
Yes.
So if you see those 4 as the home games, you're really thinking that obviously that Oklahoma one is the most competitive, I would say. But outside of that, what do you see in the Big 12 record after starting off 3-0, going to Fayetteville, being pretty, I would say a little bit higher than you would have been before the season started? What do you think do you think they can win 7 games in the Big 12?
I think right now we're set up to do better than that. Look, at the end of the day, you have to win your home games. If you count, you win 4, lose 2 of those. Now you're sitting at 7 already.
Well,
you're at 7.
Also, just to clear up, I'm talking about 7 league games or 6 league games.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Yes, that's right. Yeah, league games are different. I thought you were talking about in total. Yeah, you're right. I mean, winning those league games is the most difficult because they're the ones that are going to get to know you the quickest. This year, BYU has the advantage on every team they're going to play because we don't play Baylor. Nobody else in the Big 12 has played BYU in the last 4 years. So the team that everybody's going to be seeing is the first time they're going to see them. Next year, you're going to see adjustments, and people will be able to game plan around a lot of the things that BYU does. But I'll give you a few keys to pay attention to. Turnovers, if they can win the turnover battle, what's the current spread at Kansas right now? Is it 7.5?
I think it's up to 9.
It's 9.
See,
it's 9.
That's
now.
a silly number. I don't know what people watched that Kansas game last week. It wasn't a throwaway game, but certainly they did not put anything out there that said they're going to blow BYU out. So I would bet the under on that, just personally. So turnovers is one of them. The other thing is the conditioning. At Kansas, generally they like to spread the field and they're quick fire, right? They'll like to stretch the field and they're very quick on the edges. BYU can play to its advantages in that respect. All 4 of the defensive backs and safeties, highly experienced. 3 came from Weber State, where Jay Hill had just gotten him off his own roster. So these guys know how to play in his system. And if you saw, again, I just point to Arkansas. Arkansas put up 365 yards in the air, on the ground last year at BYU. Just on the ground. We're not even going to throw in the 180 that he got in the air. BYU held them to under 100 yards in total offense when it comes to the second half of the game. They didn't get anything more than 100 yards in the second half. And the first half, you can only point to a couple plays, and then they weren't in the first half. So I think BYU is going to be in there to play. I think that number is a crazy number. And, I don't know. We'll find out. You had all these sports writers saying BYU was going to win 4 games. 4 games in the entire season. That meant you were only going to win 2 games in conference. That's insanity. And the reason that is it's a bias. It's a bias because these people haven't watched the school. They know the reputation, but they don't know how BYU is actually set up to play game in, game out. Next year, if they win 7-8 games, they win 4 or 5 games in conference, now all of a sudden you're going to look at BYU as a perennial top 5, top 4 school.
Yeah. No, and I knew about the BYU-Utah rivalry just because obviously Rush, who's not with us tonight, but
right.
I did not. I knew that BYU's fan base traveled, but when you start seeing them take over a little bit of the Arkansas stadium, I mean, Arkansas is a no-joke fan base. The BYU brand is big time and probably the most underrated brand in the country just because they've been under the radar. And maybe it's because BYU is the Mormon school, and I don't know. Right. Maybe they just are always slept on, but you're absolutely right. And let's get right into it then. Saturday's final prediction score. If you think the BYU Cougars are going to find a way to get to 4-0, and then what's your overall season prediction? Do you think they get to Dallas in the end?
Oh boy, Dallas, that's dreaming, isn't it? Let's start with Kansas. I would still probably say Kansas in a straight up bet would be the favorite. I mean, they're at home. They do have the most experienced team. They've been P5 for a lot longer than BYU has been able to claim it. And, just from sheer reputation, you'd have to say Kansas is going to come out and play really well. I would take BYU with the points. I would say that BYU is going to put up a lot of points and could outright win. It could be another 37-31, 37-34 type situation. BYU's kicker is another thing. This is a secret. Most people don't know this, but BYU's kicker had never kicked a field goal before he made a 50-yard one on Saturday. So, and that was in the heart of the game where he's never been leaned on to do it before, just trots out and makes a 50-yard field goal. So that's not a joke, right? Those extra points are out there and not every team can get them. So I just am feeling very confident. So I would say 37-34, 37-31, something like that. And then as far as getting to Dallas, it's wide open, isn't it? Because Texas Tech, I thought Texas Tech was good, what could possibly be in that championship game. That's East. I don't know. Oklahoma State is nowhere. Baylor's disappeared. Kansas State did not look great on Saturday. And they lost to Colorado. And how good really is Colorado? We're going to find out against Oregon on Saturday. So, I don't know. It's possible. It is absolutely possible. Everything could fall. That BYU could be in that championship game.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. So you got Kansas winning a close one. I think no matter what, it will be a close game. I like that prediction. But Big 12 Mafia, we can't thank you enough for joining us, and can't wait to have you back, man, because you're part of the Big 12, aka the Wild Wild West League. Like you said, this thing is wide open, and it's going to be like that for years to come, especially with those 2 other schools leaving and these 4 newcomers coming in after the 4 newcomers this year. So everybody right now, go over there and follow the Big 12 Mafia at B12 Mafia. Pretty simple there, easy to remember. And thanks for stopping by, and look forward to having you again in the future, my man.
You bet. Absolutely. Appreciate the invitation. You guys have been great. I'm willing to come on whenever you need me, and we'll get you over on my shows too. I think you guys would love the people that I associate with over there. My team is awesome. And really quick, let me name drop them. The Wild Ute is my partner for the Holy Rivals, which is the Holy War. That's a show that we do a couple times a week. We're actually doing that tonight at 8:30 Eastern. So that'll be the Holy Rivals. We'll be on with the Wild Ute. And then my 2 really important key contributors, guys that have turned into good friends of mine, Immaculate View and Moen Sports. Both guys, if you follow them on Twitter or haven't heard of them, come watch my show tonight. You can see what these guys are put together. And they're both Big Ten guys. So they know the Big Ten really well, and they've been really good matches for us in the Big 12. And now that Utah's coming over, that's it. It's all bets are off.
Oh yeah, Holy War is a Big 12 war now.
Yeah, I was gonna say thanks for coming on, Balmer. But you listed all of the schools that they might be much easier wins than we thought 2 or 3 weeks ago. TCU can't tackle either. So, there's a chance that BYU starts pretty hot here in the league. If they can beat Kansas, I could see Cincinnati, TCU, Texas Tech being 4-0 in the league going into a huge matchup against Texas. That would be awesome. It would be great to watch the Mormons put the horns down, man.
Okay, so you guys know what the stats are for BYU with Texas, right?
They own them.
They're 4-1 all time, and they lost to Taysom Hill back-to-back years. And so if Taysom Hill comes and runs the flag out for that game, I'm going to pick them to beat the Longhorns in Austin.
Absolutely love it. Thanks, Big 12 Mafia. And yes, go follow them and go check out their show later this evening. They're doing the Lord's work over there, talking BYU football, baby.
Appreciate it, guys. Peace out. We'll see you later.
See you, Bomber. Bomber from the Big 12 from the Big 12 Mafia. So you say Big 12 college experience. We got another guest coming on real quick, but I got to get us paid real quick. We're brought to you by DraftKings, a sportsbook. It's keeping us in the NFL action with great offers every single day. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. You probably want to get down on this Kansas BYU game this weekend. Line's currently at 9. I expect points and points and points, so probably look at the over. Football's more fun when you're in on the action, so download the app now and use the promo code SGP. New customers can bet just $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official betting partner of the National Football League. With the code SGP, the crown is yours. If you have a gambling problem, please call 1-800. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. State restrictions apply. Bonus bets expire 7 days after insurance. We're also brought to you by Game Time. If you want to get over to Kansas this weekend, get some tickets. The place is going to be on fire. 2 undefeated teams, 3-0. Jayhawks, Jalon Daniels. You get the BYU Cougars coming in. And, tickets, times are tough, man. Things are expensive. You just want to get to the football field, have a cold beer, a freaking hot dog. You don't want to worry about your damn freaking price of your tickets. But get over at Game Time, and you can wait till the last minute and wait for those prices to drop. You could be at the bar like Troy is right now, and hey, boom, 10 minutes before you get cheap tickets, and next thing you know, you're in the game. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use promo code CFBX for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Agree, create an account, and redeem code CFBX for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And we're back on the Big 12 College Experience, Big 12 Game of the Week in Lawrence. Let's go. Next up, so we previewed the BYU side. Now we go to the other side, and we are bringing on new member of the Big 12 College Experience, new guest, Andy Mitts from the Rock Chalk podcast. Hey, man, we're not talking Kansas Jayhawk basketball. We're talking Kansas Jayhawk football. Andy, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on, guys.
So kind of the same thing we did with Balmer. Just going to go right into it. Kansas offense looks awesome. First game without Jalon. Bean looked great anyways. I think they're like 17th in offensive efficiency and 16th in yards per play or something like that. And we were just talking to Balmer about Jay Hill. Do you think that BYU's defense can throw a couple of, boomerangs or kind of weird things towards Jalon? Or is that 9 number going to be kind of accurate here? Because there's a lot of me that kind of wants to stay away from the 9. But, man, that Kansas offense could, 2 or 3 drives in a row, could be 21 points as fast as you think. Who do you think Kedon Slovis has a chance to play as well as Jalon here or no?
Well, that's a whole bunch to jump into, but I will agree that the 9 seems like a very good line to me. A lot of people, I think, looked at that Nevada game, and yes, the score jumped out in a way that was not great, and you look at what Jalon Daniels did. He did not have any touchdowns in that game, but there was 3 different plays where the guy was tackled at the 1-yard line going into the end zone that then turned into rushing touchdowns. So it's not like Jalon Daniels didn't play well. He had over 300 yards. He had what should have been 3 different touchdowns. This is a team, though, Kansas, that can do so many different things offensively so that you can have a team that could throw some wrinkles defensively at you. And Andy Kotelnicki, the offensive coordinator there, is going to throw stuff right back at you. He has so many different options. They have so many different things that they can do. One of the hallmarks of this Kansas offense is that not only do they put up a ton of yards and, usually put up a ton of points, but they do it with a ton of different players. There are so many games where, you have double-digit receivers, so 10 or 11 different guys, receiving the ball. You have 4 different guys rushing the ball. Kansas has just so many options, can do so many things out of the same looks, or give you completely different looks and run the exact same thing, that it is very difficult for teams to be able to game plan against, especially teams that have never played an Andy Kotelnicki offense.
Yeah.
And so, I was listening in on the interview with Big 12 Mafia and, talking about how BYU is a team that Kansas hasn't played, but I don't know that BYU has played a team that is a lot like what Kansas does at all. Kansas gets a big benefit from being unfamiliar to their opponents. It's why they get into, non-conference. They have played really well. That's why they were able to make that huge comeback against Arkansas in the Liberty Bowl last year, because they were able to throw a bunch of wrinkles that a lot of people just weren't planning for. I mean, this is going to be a fun game. I do think it's going to be extremely high scoring. I do think that the Kansas defense is a lot better than people give them credit for, and they do play a lot better at home. The real question is just going to be, is BYU going to be able to throw enough wrinkles in there that Kansas can't just key in on them? I mean, against Illinois, who has a decent offensive line, was expected, I think, to be better than it actually is going to end up being this year. But they got 6 sacks against an Illinois team that has a fairly good offensive line. So, BYU is going to get their opportunities. Kansas has a problem at times with allowing a quarterback, to kind of sneak out the opposite side of the direction. They don't necessarily contain as well when they're over pursuing a running back running the opposite way. But Kedon Slovis is not a guy that, screams to me as a rusher. He's not a guy that typically is looking to run the ball. He'll do it in certain times when it's drawn up for him. But I don't think Kansas has to worry quite as much about a guy that's going to leak out and consistently run the ball and give them multiple things to think about.
Well, Andy, let's talk some Lance Leipold, man, because I I'd make the argument he's the best coach in the Big 12 from what he was able to do in already just 2 years. And I don't think people realize when he got the job, they didn't have a full off season that first year. So it kind of took them a minute to get it going. They were able to beat Texas. Horns Down podcast, a reminder. So that was absolutely fantastic. Got it going last year. Fast start. Jalon Daniels gets hurt. Get him back for the Liberty Bowl. That game was off the charts entertaining. Year 3, fast start, 3-0, just like that, just like last year. Just talk about how he's been able to flip the culture of this program. I mean, that blackout against Illinois, that place was on fire. I have not seen Kansas football, an atmosphere like that since the Mangino days.
Yeah, I think what a lot of people don't realize is that there is an avid football fan base here at Kansas. You know, back when Mark Mangino was here, you had sellouts, you had a ton of stuff going your way, and then you get probably one of the worst stretches of athletic directors / head coaches that you could possibly get. Lou Perkins, for all that he actually did to get or to have Mangino and kind of keep him, he's the one that ran Mangino off. And then made an absolutely atrocious hire in Turner Gill, a guy that we typically don't like to name, but we will go ahead and name him here. But then you have Charlie Weiss come in, athletic director Shane Zinger. You get it's just David Beatty, a guy that was supposed to come in, right? And his entire role here at Kansas was supposed to be get us out of this scholarship deficit that we have. They had 39 players on scholarship when David Beatty got here. He was supposed to fix that, get them to, the mid 60s or something. After a couple years, then you decide if you want to keep him or not. Instead, he went and beat Texas in 2016, got himself a nice big contract extension, jumped up those expectations. And when he left, Les Miles was in the exact same situation of only like 40-something scholarship players. So unfortunately, Kansas has had so many different things go against them to really stifle the way that the program is built. I think the worst part about it was Jeff Long came and then hired Les Miles. There was talk about guys like Lance Leipold, the guy from Army. He's the guy that I actually originally wanted them to hire, and now I completely forgot his name. Monken. There we go. Jeff Monken. Like those guys were interested, and they got passed over because you look at Jeff Long and he wanted Les Miles. That was the entire plan the entire time. Lance Leipold, though, and Jeff Monken really wanted this job. It is a job that coaches desired, that coaches knew that they could do something with, because there is a very, very adamant fan base, a very avid, fan base that wants to support Kansas football. And so, bringing Lance Leipold in, giving him the carte blanche to do whatever it is that he thought he needed to do to build his program, he brought basically his entire staff with him. Didn't have enough room for all of them to be actual coaches, so a lot of them came on as analysts as well. But he did exactly what you're expected to do. You talked about how he didn't have a full offseason. He actually came on the day of the spring game, his first season. Like that was his first day on campus. Yeah. And so, like literally no spring at all. They go through the summer. You probably got to about week 8 or 9, and that's where you were finally had the number of hours of reps and all that stuff that you would normally have going into a season. And then they pull off the upset of Texas down in Austin. So they have done, I think, a lot with not very much to start with. But the big message that he gives is the consistency. I wrote an article over at Blue Wings Rising, which is the site that I run that covers KU. At the end of that first summer fall camp that they had, after the first season, going into the next, that's the big message is consistency. They want to, they have the same entire coaching staff this year that they had last year. They only added Sean Snyder as an analyst to help with special teams. Everything is the same. They have 92% of their offensive production came back this year. They had 85% total production. They have been so consistent, been able to build on that. They haven't had to learn a lot of the things, again, that they did last year. They've been able to just add new wrinkles. They bring guys up to speed, but there's so many guys in the room that know what they're trying to do that you don't, you can have your 3, seniors and juniors teach the 4 freshmen what it is that they need to do, what they need to be looking for. there were so many stories coming out of fall camp of the guys that would go in and jump in and coach in the opportunities that they had to before the actual coaching staff could get there to give them the message. So when you have that kind of buy-in for your program and you have guys understand it so well, it allows you to do a bunch of different things.
I wanted to ask, well, first of all, I want to ask a question that's not the real question, but how fucking sweet was that big-ass Jayhawk on the black helmets when they went all black?
Oh, yeah. I normally hate blackout uniforms because I think it's a gimmick that you just do to have the gimmick. But if you're going to do it, don't do like what a lot of teams do where it's like everything's black or everything's like black with white accents or anything. Use your colors to go along with it. A black base, and then you use that to highlight all the other stuff. So the Jayhawk on the helmet, I love the way they use the circus font. That's something that normally the basketball team uses, but the football team hasn't really. The angry Jayhawk is the one that they use for the helmet. That's the one I love. And apparently that's like the new football Jayhawk that they're going to be using. I absolutely love it. So I'm really excited about the way that those uniforms came out. I'm not usually a huge uniform guy, but when those dropped, it's just like, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. And this is the way that you should do a black uniform if you're going to do it.
See, that was one of the things we talked about on some previous episodes, those Houston uniforms that dropped. And then when they posted the Kansas uniforms, those were complete bet changers. You go and you cash out and you change your bet right away when you see that the team's wearing those. The real question I wanted to ask was more, you mentioned you think there's going to be quite a bit of points. You think it's going to be, 37-31, 37-34. I think the over-under is at like 55.5.
Yeah. I actually think that's going to be more.
That seems like a really easy over, right?
That's what the BYU guy was saying. 37-34. I mean, I would not be shocked if these teams are both scoring in the 40s because I think Kansas is able to do it. BYU has shown the ability to kind of get up there and score a decent amount. I do wonder though, like with the way that they played against Sam Houston in the first game, if that was just them needing some time to kind of get warmed up, or if there are potentially some issues there. I think really what it's going to come down to that, the only way that over has a problem is if Kansas is able to tee off on Kedon Slovis really quickly and bring a ton of pressure, and then BYU just never gets anything going. That's what the game against Illinois was looking like. And then we had some very interesting penalties and some very ridiculous calls that I won't go into here. I'm sure that you guys would love to hear the huge rant, but I've already done that multiple times. It's just Kansas has shown the ability, especially on defense at home, to feed off the energy of the crowd and do everything that you possibly can to make it nearly impossible for the other team to really do much.
Yeah, no, I've been super impressed with Kansas. Let me talk your quarterback, man, Jalon Daniels, on the preseason show, our Kansas episode. I hope all you Jayhawk fans watching knew how high we were on this guy. I think we had him going 9-3, Troy. And Troy, I think, had him in the Big 12 championship at Dallas. And one of the long shots that we gave out was 100-1 Jalon Daniels to win the Heisman Trophy winner. Because we it wasn't necessarily we thought they were going to go 11-1 or 10-2 and be a playoff contender, national playoff contender. But we knew within another year in Leipold's system how electric he was last year when he was healthy. I know he missed the Missouri State game, so right away we're like, God damn it. Like that was it. We want him to pad some stats a little bit. But I mean, he's picked up right where he's left off. Just talk about how good he's been for these Jayhawks when he's been able to stay healthy. And do you think he can get in this Heisman Trophy case or a Heisman candidate case if he can just stay a little bit healthy down the stretch? I know he's down one game, but I mean, he's going to put up the numbers.
Yeah, it's funny. He didn't really need that Missouri State game to pad his stats because he did that against Illinois. And then, I mean, even against Nevada, he was padding his stats there. I think what you look at there is, I think the biggest detriment to his Heisman case is the fact that he has Devin Neal in the backfield. Because Devin Neal is an absolute beast rushing the ball. He already had, he's averaging over 100 yards a game. He has 5 touchdowns already on only 40 carries. He's averaging, it's like 7.5 yards a carry, which is just absolutely ridiculous at this point. And that's not, he's had a ton of gigantic, like 40-yard runs, and then he's like slamming into the middle of the line. He's picking up big chunks and also like getting, very, very methodical rushes moving forward. But Jalon Daniels, I think, has everything you need to get back into that Heisman race. He just needs to have one of those, like I can look at a couple games and think that those are really good opportunities for him to get a 450-yard, 5-touchdown game. You have one of those, that's the moment that you need to get back into like the discussion about it. And then as long as, he has decent stats compared to everyone else, you look at what he did, everyone's going to call back to the Liberty Bowl game that he, put up just absolutely astronomical stats. And it's not supposed to be like a lifetime achievement award type of thing, and you're really only supposed to take into account that, particular year. But if you get him into a situation where he is, going head to head with another player, you look at what he's able to do and how he's able to put a team on his back like that. And I think that gives him the kind of that edge up. I'm not saying that he's going to win it just because there's too many other good quarterbacks that are out there that have already gotten a huge head start on him. But I think if Kansas finds themselves, in the Big 12 title game, which was something that I thought was maybe a really small outside shot, but it's starting to look more and more like it's a decent possibility with the way that some of these other teams are kind of floundering. Kansas finds themselves in the Big 12 title game, and if he has anything close to what he had last year, I think it's hard to keep him out of being a finalist at that point.
So just kind of piggybacking on that, just a really quick, maybe to give people a better idea of how good Kansas really was last year. They finished 1-6, right? Jalon goes down, and they lose TCU, Oklahoma, Baylor, and then Texas and Kansas State, right? Like they beat Oklahoma State right in between those three, right. Back-to-back 3 losses. How many of those 6 losses do they win if Jalon Daniels is simply playing quarterback?
Well, it's funny because they went down. He went down against TCU. Jason Bean came in and almost won the game for them. And honestly, the entire complexion of that game changed when Jason Bean came in. Both teams were just kind of slinging the ball all over the place. But, I have to think you go on the road against Baylor the next week, and, Bean made a couple big mistakes that I don't think Jalon Daniels would have made if he was healthy. Same thing against Oklahoma. You got down early and then came all the way back. And if Jalon Daniels is the one on the sideline or the one, underneath center, that puts a lot more pressure on Oklahoma. So I think they could have won that game. I don't know that they necessarily would have. The Texas Tech game was close because Kansas couldn't get much going until the fourth quarter. And then, even then at that point, that's when Texas Tech took off and Kansas wasn't able to do much with Bean. And again, I think Bean is a great quarterback. He was a guy that you would love to have as your starter if you needed somebody, right? Like he would be a middle of the pack Big 12 quarterback if he was the guy starting all the time. But Jalon Daniels is just so much better than that. The Oklahoma State game was perfect for him because Oklahoma State had all the injury issues as well. So Jason Bean was able to kind of take advantage of that and get a huge win for him. But then Jalon Daniels comes back against Texas, and you can tell he's affected by that injury. And Texas just completely demolishes Kansas because Kansas's running defense wasn't that great. And, you have Bijan Robinson who runs for like 280 yards. Like there's not much you could have done there. I don't think Jalon Daniels could have made the difference there. And then you end up at Kansas State. I don't think Kansas State, I don't think KU actually played atrociously in that game. They were down really early because of a fumble on their 5-yard line on a punt, and then there was another turnover. Like there was some weird stuff happening in the rain over in Manhattan, and yet Kansas still got it within striking distance going into halftime. They almost came all the way back before halftime. And then the second half, Kansas State was just able to put it away. So this is a team, I think, that didn't have the foundation last year to be able to go through all of those games and get to the end and be ready to go. They had a defensive line rotation that, their biggest strength was the amount of players they had on that defensive line rotation. They weren't the kind of caliber of players that if one of them had to sit there and play the entire game or play, 30 out of, 40 snaps, that he would be able to kind of maintain that and keep going. And Oklahoma took advantage of that. Baylor took advantage of that. Texas really took advantage of that. But when they were a very, very much a second half team last year because they would just wear down the opposing offensive line. They don't have to do that this year. They have legitimate guys that are able to rush, that are able to get around. They've taken Jeremy Robinson, who was mainly on the outside last year, mainly on the inside last year, and they've shifted him around. He now plays both inside and outside. And has wreaked a lot of havoc in the backfield for a lot of teams so far this year. So the fact that they have now defensive linemen that they can count on to actually create problems for their opponent has made it so much easier for the rest of the defense. It's going to be great, I think, this year to kind of see what they're able to do and see how they take that next step against some of those better teams. They get to play Oklahoma this year. They get to go down to Texas, next week. We'll see how that one goes. But they're going to have some opportunities to really make a statement here and get themselves in position to be pushing for the Big 12 title game, as they end the season playing against Texas Tech and then Kansas State and then go on the road to Cincinnati.
So sorry to jump in front of you, Ryan. It was kind of a two-part question. If they were, I would give them at least 2 more wins if Jalon plays the whole year. Like I think they could beat Baylor and Texas Tech out of those 2 losses that they had.
Probably.
If they end the year with 8 wins last year instead of going 6-6 and then having the greatest bowl game to watch of the whole season, if they were to get 8 wins, how much different would just the public's opinion on Kansas be coming into this year? Because that was kind of my angle. I thought that they were, an 8, maybe even 9-win team last year that just had some things fall in the wrong way. And they kind of had the same setup this year where they could start off real hot and give themselves a couple of wins in their pocket. I think they could win the Big 12, man. They might have the best quarterback in the conference.
No doubt.
Yeah. I think they do honestly have the best quarterback in the conference at this point. And yes, that's me, a biased Kansas fan. But you look at, Quinn Ewers has had issues, in multiple weeks trying to be consistent. And Dylan Gabriel has not had to really play anybody at this point. So, he has a chance, I think, to be the best quarterback, but they're going to have to do it against better competition than that. That SMU game kind of made me wonder what's going on with Gabriel. But anyway, I don't think last year that they would have been able to be much better because you also have to remember, the offense floundered against Iowa State. And I think there was some issues with some players kind of being injured a little bit, but they got really lucky in that Iowa State game where Iowa State missed 3 field goals that all of them would have, allowed them to tie that game.
I think Jalon Daniels threw for like 98 yards in that game. Total.
He threw for 98 yards. I think he had 2 picks. It was a horrible game for Kansas. You also have to remember that, they got down really early against West Virginia and Houston, both of those on the road. And it took Houston just being absolutely garbage last year for them to be able to come back and win that one. So, they definitely had some things go their way. There's 3 games that I think that they played that they very easily could have lost. But I think there's 2 or 3 games that if Jalon Daniels was playing the entire year that they could have won those as well. So I do think, though, this year, my expectation coming into the year, I kept trying to downplay expectations and try to make sure I wasn't, but 9-3 is what I saw coming into the year. You go through the schedule, and I fully expected, to win this BYU game because I was worried about, Big 12 Mafia talked about how, a lot of teams or a lot of people are overlooking BYU. I don't think it has anything to do with the fact of it's BYU. It's a school that we don't care about. I think it has a lot more to do with the fact of teams that come into brand new conferences struggle to get used to those conferences. You're taking different trips. You're seeing different people. You're going to different locations, just everything. Now, BYU is a little bit different in that they were independent, so they're not going from one conference to another conference. But I think that even more is, I actually talked about this with a BYU guest on my podcast. They've kind of flipped the way that their schedule is. Normally, they would do the really tough games up front, and then they get to the end of the year and they'd be playing a lot of those, bye games because you couldn't find opponents that were in the middle of their conference season. And so you would see them kind of tail off at the end of the year because they were playing a bunch of games that didn't necessarily really matter. They knew where they were going bowling. They knew all of this stuff. Now you're seeing they have to kind of ramp up the same way that everyone else does. It's a completely different mindset. It's a completely different way to approach a season. And so I don't think people were overlooking BYU because it's BYU. I think there's so many different things. Same with Cincinnati, UCF, and Houston. A lot of people were worried about how well they were going to be able to compete this year because it's so much different. I think that, we saw that with Cincinnati against Miami of Ohio. They just completely floundered at that point.
Oh, yeah.
But so I had Kansas beating, I actually had Kansas going 5-1 to start the year, losing at Texas. And then, they have some pretty, I think, favorable stretches. You have, Oklahoma State and Iowa State. You have both of those on the road, and those 2 teams are looking like complete garbage this year. You have Texas Tech and Kansas State both coming to town. You go on the road to Cincinnati at the end of the year, which isn't really that big of a deal, I think. that point, Cincinnati will have had time to kind of run the course with all the, adrenaline that they have. So, the big games to worry about is like Oklahoma. You play Oklahoma at home. You almost beat them at home 2 years ago. You had a huge comeback on them last year down in Norman. I think Kansas is, honestly, if I look at it, I think the defense is probably on par and the offense is better. The question is, can they execute at a higher level? And so the fact that it's at home, this is a Kansas team that has shown time and time again in the last year and a half that they play much better at home. And I think that's the other thing a lot of people don't realize. That home split, that home away split, especially for the defense, is just the starkest thing I've ever seen. It was absolutely ridiculous how much better they played at home than they played on the road last year. And so that's continued into this year. And I really think that Kansas has an opportunity to find themselves in Arlington.
So right into it before we let you go, Andy.
Yeah,
I think we all agree. We think Kansas is going to win on Saturday. I'll get your score prediction, but in the end, do they get to Arlington? And if they get to Arlington, do they win it?
I'm still hesitant to say that they're going to get to Arlington. I think it's going to come down to that Kansas State game. Although I think that they can beat Kansas State, I really worry about some of the stuff. Kansas State I don't think looks as good this year as they did last year, and I think that they haven't had that kind of luck. So, yeah, I mean, I honestly, if I had to pick it right now, I think they do make it to Arlington, just because the way that the schedule shapes up, the way that they're able to do all of this stuff, they'll be rematching against Texas in Arlington at the end of the year.
I love it.
See, you're thinking the right way. Texas didn't get to play Kansas on the schedule, which is the funniest, most hilarious thing on their way out of the league, that they don't schedule the team that beats their ass.
Texas plays Kansas next week down in Austin.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They go right after BYU.
Yeah. No. Really, what it is that they decided it wasn't enough for Texas to lose down in Austin to Kansas on their way out. They had to lose to them twice. Once in Austin in week 5, and then once in the Big 12 championship. So
it'd be absolutely fantastic.
Because that would be one of the coolest angles of the Big 12 title, is if Kansas gets to beat
Can
Texas.
you imagine just how embarrassing it would be for SEC fans to be associated with that?
Oh, the SEC's taken plenty of lumps so far this non-con, so
I'm hoping
just another
for
one.
That would be awesome. Although the K-State Kansas rematch would be pretty cool.
That's true. A Sunflower Showdown down in Arlington, I would not be opposed to that, because that would be a lot of fun.
No doubt. Well, everybody, go check out Andy Mitts over at the Rock Chalk Podcast. And Andy, I mean, basketball season's right around the corner. You guys are going to be preseason 1. So yeah, we're gonna have you back on here.
Man, it's gonna be interesting covering a potentially Big 12 championship football team and the number 1 team in the nation in basketball. I will say though, for this game, I know that I do think that Kansas is gonna win this game, and I think they're gonna win big, pulling away at the end. Give me Hawks by 17. Shout out to Bryson Stricker. I will say that they win this game. Let's go 47-30.
47-30, so Andy's on the over. Andy's got the Jayhawks.
And as Andy being obviously, if you're a Kansas fan, you love basketball, just like we were talking about. Is there a chance that the Big 12 could get 4 1 seeds here in the next couple of years?
I wish. I wish. Unfortunately, I just don't think people will actually let that happen. I do think, though, that we're not very far off from the Big 12 having 3 teams in the Final Four in a single season.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I guess if they get 2 1 seeds and 2 2 seeds and they split them all up, there's a chance the whole Final Four is.
Oh, yeah.
Man, Jerry Jones has got to be hoping he's got the Final Four for the year that the Big 12 gets all 4 of them in there.
Get my Mountaineers there. So, everybody go check out Andy Mitts over at the Rock Chalk Podcast. Follow Andy personally at Andy Mitts 12 and at Rock Chalk Pod. Andy, anything else you want to plug before we let you go, man?
You can also catch all of the covers that I have. I run the Sports Illustrated Fan Nation site covering the Jayhawks. That's bluewingsrising.com.
Awesome. Well, Andy, appreciate you hopping on, and we look forward to having you back, man. Good luck on Saturday.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Andy.
Andy Mitts from the Rock Chalk Pod. We will be back on Thursday to break down the rest of the slate. We'll go each and every game.
I was going to say we got a BYU fan saying it's going to be a close game, and we got a Kansas fan saying it's going to be a blowout. and the line's set at 9, I think everybody is right. Like, if you take the median of everything, I think this might be a 9-point game.
I think it's set there for a reason. Those casinos didn't build themselves. But before we get out of here, Troy, tell everybody where to find you, man. I know you're headed over the Nats game here tonight.
Well, you can definitely find me at Walter's Sports Bar. I mean, you got Captain and Big Pete and everybody walking around in the background. You can find me on the X. Up until they start charging like $1.99 to use Twitter after the new Elon news came out. But yeah, I'd probably suck it up and pay that just to keep using Twitter. It's way too much fun. You can find me on the X at Troy Chewning. Yeah, just the full name, TroyChewning. And you can definitely make some money if you follow us on the X, either at the College Experience, at Moneyline Mac for Ryan, or at Rambling Rush for Rush, or even at Troy Chewning. 33-1 Moneyline parlay, just easily bangs. And you hit the 33-1 Moneyline parlay on the game where you get to walk out of the stadium and burn couches down. It doesn't get any better than that. I mean, it's the perfect evening. You go the whole day watching college football, getting blasted, watching all your bets hit. It gets down to that Pitt, West Virginia game. You see the quarterback go down, and you're like, oh, no, not my parlay. Not a problem. We have C.J. Donaldson, who's going to run right at your ass and right through your ass. So, you know, a pretty good weekend. You hit a 33-1 parlay, and you better be up money. I mean, if you somehow lost money with a 33-1 parlay, maybe play like mini golf or something like that. Like bet money on bowling instead. But man, it was a pretty good weekend last week. I think when I was going through our picks, I think I only went 4 and 5. But if you
got 33-1,
well, if you factor in the 33-1 and you factor in the South Alabama money line play, even though you bet Oklahoma State with the spread, you can be up, I don't know, $2,200 or something like that.
Oh yeah. No, yeah, I mean, if you didn't make money off us last weekend, too bad for you. Hey, and Pitt fans, I'm going to keep being your worst nightmare because I ain't going anywhere, and you guys are going to eat shit again on December 6th. So you guys can kiss my ass. Just like what I said, we're going to beat your ass this last Saturday. All 3 months, I said we'd be favored. You said, no way. Of course we were favored. And
you said
one going away.
You said take them at +1. You said take them at a pick 'em. You said take them at -1. You said take them at -2, -2.5, -3. No question.
We ain't going anywhere. We'll see you guys Thursday, and don't forget to let it ride.